Hey there. Welcome back to Time Travel Comics, where we take a blast to the past. Here, we're in for a treat. We're going to talk about pinball and explore covers and interior artwork with the theme involved. Pinball has an early start back in France in the late 1600s. It was King Louis that actually had small tabletop pinball machines inside the castle in his home where his guests would play. The name of those earlier pinball machines were called bagatelle. And bagatelle was a set of pins and needles, and a small bearing would go into pockets to keep score. It was only very simplistic with a plunger design, as you can see in the photo that I'm going to overlay right here. As you can take a look, this is a wooden bagatelle table. It wasn't until later that Charles P. Young in York, Pennsylvania came up with a more sophisticated pinball machine and actually introduced a coin slot to put quarters in. And with that design, he actually introduced a little bit of a bevel and incline to let the ball go down with gravity. It was later on that companies like Bally, Williams, and Gottlieb perfected the pinball table and introduced gorgeous artwork and the Art Deco style. In 1933, in the Chicago World's Fair, we have the debut of the Art Deco style pinball machine. It did not have flippers then, and it did not have pop bumpers or kickers or bounce back slots that we know and play in the late 50s and 60s. It wasn't until Gottlieb in 1947 that the first flippers were introduced. The game was called Humpty Dumpty, as you can see in this image here. Later on, Williams created Sunny, which changed the dynamics of the game. With the flipper, you're able to control the ball, and it became not a game of chance, but a game of skill, where the player can actually control the trajectory of the ball. Later on, Williams Company, based in Chicago, created electromagnetic component, where the ball bearing that was made of metal would make contact with the metal plate and create bump effects, lighting, bells, and whistles, with the use of the technology at the time. Pinball evolved with technology and progress, and even today is still being played, but not so much with the advent of arcades and video games. But it's nice to look at the nostalgia of what made pinball a fun pastime. We're in for a treat today because we're going to look at comic book covers and interior artwork with the comic book theme. I actually have a book here that closely resembles this machine, the Star Explorer from 1977. And here we have Adam Strange. I'm going to put this right next to the marquee here and look at the resemblance. We have a spaceman with a suit on, a helmet, the space gun, almost in the same stance as we have here. This book, coincidentally, came out in 1977, the same time this machine came out. So take a look at that. Maybe the pinball machine got its inspiration from this cover from DC Comics. Here's a closer look at the cover, just a little more clear as the comic is out of the bag. And this is an Ernie Chua cover. Ernie also went by Ernie Chen. And this is DC, Superstars of Space. And look at the resemblance right there. You can see everything about it. Well, now we'll buckle up and take a look at more covers. Okay, let's get our time machine geared up. We have our Duncan parking meter. It's a special device here. Using coins from different time periods and putting it in the slot, it can take us and find items from that era. Okay, here we go. As we wait for our time machine to find us some comic books from the past, we're going to take a look at a catalog from 1980. And this is a parts catalog for those repairing pinball machine. And this is unique because it has a lot of schematics and engineering photos and designs to tell a story about what goes inside of a pinball machine. So these are all for replacement parts for Bally's. And you can see the play fields and some of the gears, the cabinet parts. And further on, this is interesting, the bumper assembly, the pop bumper assembly. So when the pinball makes the contact with the bottom collar here, that electromagnetic component completes a circuit to make the collar pop up against this rim here that's on a diagonal, so it shoots the ball away. Right as it goes into that area, this is excited, it gets activated, and then pop, then the ball shoots out. So back in the day, they did need some repair, and you can see where the light bulb goes on top, the flickers, and some of the assembly. Right here is a coil, and that acts like a capacitor and holds the charge, so whenever that contact is met, it ejects it and pops it up. So pretty neat to see. There's a pop bumper assembly in case you needed to repair your machine. But this is what they had back in the day. These were specifically for pinball repair people. Some of the drop target assemblies, you can see that there. Just a neat book. There are a few of these on eBay where you can kind of see all the schematics in part, the design, the layout, the lanes where the ball goes through, 3 pop bumper assembly, the light. And really, pinball is about finding the lights and following the instructions and not aimlessly striking the ball where you can, because there's a sequence and an order by which to play to get the most points. And typically the flippers are on the bottom where the ball drains. And the early examples from the 50s and 60s, those are called wooden rail and metal rail pinball machine, flippers were throughout the playfield. But earlier times that was the case, but now they're mostly at the bottom. So, pinball. I hear a time machine whirring and clicking away. It's probably time for our first book in the queue. This is Archie series Jughead number 133, and this came out in June of 1966. And from the last video we saw a few Archie covers, so I think it's popular with the time machine, but you never know what you're going to get. But look at that cover, look at the colors, the bonk, the ding ding ding, the ring. And you could see the pop bumpers, the flippers. You can see Jughead seemingly keeping his cool and having a good time as he's racking up the points. And this particular scoring wasn't digital or analog. It kind of lit up as you went. And some of those were in the 60s did light up and you knew where you stood. So it didn't always have numbers and a scoring counter, as you might see. But a lot of action going on, even aliens dropping by to visit. It's funny, they mistake the pinball machine for a computer. Saying, man, dig these crazy Earth computers. They sure would make for fun computers. But it's just fun to see. The plunger on the bottom, the balls loading, the action. And surprisingly, the inside of the comic does not depict any pinball, but another story. I guess they're running over here to play the arcades. So a nice pinball cover. What do you know, another comic book here, but actually the cover doesn't really show anything with pinball. They're kind of in a forest, hunting rather, and they come across a snack stand, hungry for some burgers and hot dogs. But on the inside of the book, there is some artwork with the pinball machine, and it's dedicated to the theme here, Jughead in Thumb Fun. You can bring the book a little closer here. You can kind of see he's practicing, and Archie's kind of bewildered. What is Jughead doing? I don't understand it. And then further on, he's in a tournament, and there he has it. He's using the plunger to time his shot and to play pinball. He's at actually the Valley Pinball Championship. And this is just great artwork by Dan DeCarlo. Dan DeCarlo worked for Archie for many years, but his first assignment was with Timely Comics. As editor-in-chief, Stan Lee assigned him to Genie. Genie was a teenage humor magazine, and later on Millie the Model and My Friend Irma. If you haven't read My Friend Irma, it's a riot. A lot of funny, kind of naive situations that happen there. And DeCarlo freelanced and worked for Archie since the 1950s. And this is one of his works over here. Sam Schwartz also worked on Archie comics. And sometimes it's not known whether Sam Schwartz or Dan DeCarlo did the artwork, but look at that pinball machine. Here you see some numbers on the counter over here, and you see that artwork. And pinball is kind of a lot like comic books because there's art involved. There's art on the sides of the machine, on the marquee, on the glass panel on the back. So, yeah, just a fun one. Look at him go. Look at that spectator watching. The next book comes a little bit later, and this is from the year 1994, January 94. Archie Comics actually ventured out to take on different titles to expand beyond its traditional Jughead, Betty and Veronica, and the like, and acquired the license for Sega character Sonic the Hedgehog, which was a video game character, the blur and blue in the middle, who would run through Mobius, which was his landscape and planet, to stop the evil Dr. Robotnik. And he has to go through this arcade pinball-like setup that takes place in a volcano. And you can see the fire on the side. He's running out through the track. There's a flipper there waiting for him that might knock him over. And Sonic the Hedgehog, at the time, was a popular game that came out at that time in '94 was Sonic Spinball, which is right over here, as the logo depicts over there. So it's a tie-in of the video game, so that's why he's wearing a tie. So a tie-in to the video game in a comic book. Yeah, some of that action is portrayed here where he's on a pinball ramp and trying to elude his enemies that are awaiting him. There's the bad guy. They later called Eggman, but previously it was Dr. Robotnik, and very much a big part of the Sega franchise. And you can see his pinball-like action here as he flips off the flipper, bounces around, ricocheting, knocking out the enemies, and it's just reminiscent of pinball, all the action there. Even the plunger knocking him out and game over. Oh boy. Yeah, this book was created by Dave Manak and Henry Scapelli. And Scapelli used to do a lot of inks for Archie Comics, and by this time, in '94, he was older in age. But Dave Manak made 26 appearances in the House of Mystery with DC Comics, and also with the horror genre. So he did a lot with DC before joining Archie and working with Sonic the Hedgehog. And there are not too many pinball themes in comics, so upon doing research, not too many out there, but we're going to take a look as many as we can. A couple of Scapelli's works are in Binky. These are a couple covers for fun. So this was DC Comics' answer to Archie. It's kind of these fun, whimsical books right here. And you can see the car keeps going, and he's kind of popping off the back of the driver's seat as he sees another gal. That's not very nice. And then here we have her knocking him with the drumstick. So these are fun comics, and they were done by Harry Scapelli, as you could see the signature kind of right up and down there. So that's Scapelli's signature right there, and he worked for Archie later on. Just wanted to show you a few covers on that of Binky from DC Comics. As we depart from Sonic the Hedgehog and the Spinball game adaptation and comic book, we're met with Detective Comics. Detective Comics starring Batman, and this is issue 545, came out in December of 1984, and it's not a pinball cover. In fact, it's quite different. Somebody turning up in the water here, a hunting dog, a character in the middle. It just doesn't really relate to pinball, but if we open the pages, a side story actually shows one of the characters that the Green Arrow has to come in contact with, and that's Pinball Wizard. Pinball Wizard is a character designed by Sean McManus, and you could see his costume is red. It has some details on there. You can see the ball bearings shooting out. This is his weapon of choice, dodging an arrow here. Or maybe not, because it strikes his suit and pack there. And Pinball Wizard in the 80s kind of was a homage to pinball in a way. Just kind of showed that it existed, and interesting work. You can see the excitement and the shock, rather, of what's going on. The tube rupturing, all the pinballs. And pinballs are hard. I would definitely stay out of the way of those. But this is a character based on pinball. Not too many of them. So thank you, Pinball Wizard, for making an appearance in Detective Comics 545. Great artwork, nice shading. You can see that 3D-ness and that angle right there. Oh boy, what an enemy. The next book I would like to present is a Marvel comic featuring pinball, and that is Marvel Team Up number 66. And Marvel Team Ups number 66 came out in 1977, kind of at the height of the pinball culture, as they were in billiards and arcades. And this particular book features pinball in action. And this beautiful cover is John Byrne, who did a lot of artwork for X-Men, West Coast Avengers, a lot of the Bronze Age Marvel titles. And John Byrne was actually founded by the writer Chris Clairmont, who urged him to come on over and do some pencils for him. And without Chris Clairmont, we wouldn't have had John Byrne, who was working for Charlton Comics at the time. And the cover features Arcade, who's the nemesis and antagonist of Spider-Man and Captain Britain. You could see a mace-like pinball, a flipper on the bottom, and a pop bumper, and the swing of action there. And if you look at Arcade, his smile kind of closely resembles the Joker that we know from the Batman series and Detective Comics. And it's interesting. There is a little bit of foreshadowing, because Batman number 44 featured the Joker, and that came out in 1947. And I'm going to show a little overlay here of a panel from Batman number 44. And you can see how the artwork and that play field, that Bagatelle-like pinball table, shows that kind of smile and deviantness of that, the Joker. And it wasn't the first time that pinball was featured. Also, Batman number 75 that came out in February of 1953 also features pinball, and the characters were captured in an orb and a circle. There was a pinball that bounced around the playfield with. So looking into the pages, you can see John Byrne's work. And we have Spider-Man and Captain Britain captured inside of the pinball, about to be plunged into this elaborate pinball table. And what made John Byrne's artwork stand out is his attention to detail, especially with the background. And you can see the two characters launching at it. They're going to hit the ramp, going through the lanes, and then popping through the bumpers before meeting more adventure and the flippers. An arcade diabolical machine. You can see the hand pulling the plunger and ready to go. And what a spread of great creativity on the part of the artist to show the pinball machine and the long horizontal and the vertical with the marquee and back glass. And it's just kind of a stunning way to do it. And just like we saw in Batman, captured in the ball, and look at the action. Thonk, the flipper hitting the pinball, featuring the characters. And eventually they crash out and then they go after Arcade. But just thumping through the pages, you can just see all the background work that's very distinctive to John Byrne. You can see the credits on the top here too. So this is Marvel Team Up number 66, and a lot of pinball action there at the height of pinball. The next book was also illustrated and penciled by John Byrne and inked by none other than Terry Austin. And this is the Uncanny XMen number 123. And this came out in 1979, just a couple years after the book we saw, which was a team-up. And again, Chris Clairmont and John Burns and Terry Austin, more so with this book because he did the cover. The three of them did a lot for Bronze Age Marvel and even introduced new characters in Giant Size X-Men number 1. But moving this book over, we're going to take a look at the Uncanny X-Men and just look at the artwork here. The pinball, Cyclops and the Wolverine awaiting that hurling projectile. Meanwhile, Colossus is punching through the glass to get out of this big, oversized pinball machine. And again we're greeted by Arcade. The smile to me resembles more of the Joker, just as we saw in those earlier issues. In those sample panels, and you can see everybody's caught up in the pinball machine. You have the characteristic motifs, the bumpers, the slots, the bonus points, and well, the flippers should be right there, but look at John Byrne's work in the inside. You see the background of Greenwich Village and the Arc de Triomphe replica, the skyscrapers in New York as Spider-Man is zeroing in on the action and looking for what's going on. And this issue also has some scenes of New York, and the background is just stunning. And that's how you know that you're looking at John Byrne's work, because of all the detail in the background. Even the Lincoln Center, as the camera comes into focus, the shadows, the light, it's just amazing with John Burns and Terry Austin penciling. It's just very distinct of the Bronze Age. But looking ahead, we have Arcade planning his particular adventure for our heroes, the X-Men. And there we have it again. The characters are caught up in a pinball. They're about to shock against the bumpers, and that can be, you can see the zap there, and that's kind of scary. That wasn't done before. It was done in Batman as well. You could see them going through the ramp one by one into the pinball playfield. You have the flipper coming at them, and you have the bing bang ricocheting, if you will. A lot of action, a lot of motion, and John Byrne making it happen. And eventually they try to go after the diabolical nemesis, and none other than Wolverine and the X-Men are right there to hack and slash through. But the cover is really the big draw for this particular book, number 123. And like I said, it came out a couple years after the first one that we saw. There was the team up. So just take a moment to enjoy that great pinball action and that fusion of artwork and bells and whistles depicted on the cover here. The final book that will be showing you is from 1979, just a little bit later, and actually Captain America has some pinball theme going on in the background as he's surrounded in Coney Island, which is in New York, and you could see the bad guys and his adversaries all around them, but in the background, in the backlight, are the pinball machines here. And the action comes into play even as Captain America uses his legs to knock over one of the pinball machines toward his enemy to fend them off. And you can even read the bubble. He's going to use this old pinball machine to knock it over. And you can see them in a row as they're characteristically stacked in the arcade, in the billiard halls, bowling alley. And again, 1979, kind of toward the height of pinball, and Captain America working his magic to get the best of the bad guys. So that's pretty neat. A little Marvel homage, or just a coincidence that they're showing pinball in the comic book. So just looking at the Marvel lineup of the Bronze Age, you have a little pinball activity going on here. And these two are from John Byrne. However, this was a different artist on the top, and it's Don Perlin, more of a Bronze Age. Did most work for Captain America, but pinball was just a big entertainment back in the day. Well, that concludes our lineup of some nice pinball covers and interior artwork, and we see some parallels from before in Batman, from issue number 44 and issue number 75, with that trapped in a pinball theme come to life. And it kind of revisited. Maybe Chris Clairmont drew his inspiration from those books and carried them on into the Bronze Age from the Golden Age. But it still makes for a fun story, kind of getting caught up in the big machine itself, and just the bells and the whistles and the machinery. So yeah, thanks again for joining me on this little tour of pinball in comic book, and I hope you enjoyed. That wraps up another episode of Time Travel Comics, where we explored pinball. Comic books and pinball alike have a rich history of art and design, and it's nice to see some parallels there, even here with Pinball Wizard, and he too has been tilted. Looking at back glasses and play fields, you can't help but to be enticed by the beauty and the colors, and it's just a rich part of our history. Even as Jughead plugs away, and as we look at these two great books in Marvel with Arcade, Terry Austin, John Byrne, and Chris Clairmont, they made it happen in the Bronze Age, especially with X-Men. So thanks again for joining. And I hope you enjoyed.